Rocketarium often packages sub-assemblies into their rocket kits, and they also sell these independently for use in your own rockets. So this is the BT-60 24mm motor mount. It fits both D and E black powder engines and can go up to an F-size composite engine. Inside the bag we've got a multitude of parts here. This is the motor mount itself. This is a spacer tube that will be used to measure where the engine block goes. It's not actually part of the assembly. This is a spacer for the motors. So this will, when finished, will fit an E-sized Estes black powder motor or the equivalent size composite. If you're using the shorter 24mm motors like the Estes D or the Estes C11, this goes ahead of the motor to take up the space that would otherwise be occupied by an E motor. All right, we have two centering rings, an engine block or thrust ring, an engine hook sleeve, and this just helps keep the engine hook from rattling around, and then the engine hook itself. To start, we need to put a ring of glue inside the forward end at about 3/4 of an inch down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take an applicator here and measure on my ruler where that's going to be. And I'm just going to put my thumb there as a quick measurement. And now I can just get some glue on my applicator here. Come back to where my thumb was. And if you need to, you can mark this. Okay, and so here's my motor mount tube. I'm going to stick my applicator into my thumb hits and just rotate that around a few times. So now we've got a ring of glue in there. And now stick the thrust ring in the aft end of the motor mount. And then the spacer tube here will go in, and now you just push this down until it's flush. And that will properly space where that thrust ring goes. You want to immediately take this back out in case there's some excess glue down there. And there's a thin film of glue. I got my glue a little bit deeper than 3/4 of an inch, but it's not a big deal because the thrust ring there has removed most of it. It's left a little film. Once it's dry, it will be just fine. Next, we need to measure from the aft end 3 3/4 inches or 95 millimeters, whichever you prefer. All right, and at that point, we're going to put a little slit. So you can mark this with a pencil ahead of time if you want, or you can just hit it with your knife. And the idea is that this should be right above where that thrust ring is. Okay, so if you're hitting some resistance there, you might be just on the thrust ring. Just bring it up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you can see my knife coming through there. That just needs to be wide enough to put the forward hook part in. So the 90-degree angle there, not the fancier bent piece on the other end. So that's just going to pop right in there, like that. Okay, and so now, not only is the engine thrusting against that engine block or thrust ring, it's also thrusting against this. So it's just holding everything in there really, really nicely. Okay, now we need to make a few other marks. So we need to make a mark at 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters from the aft end. And you want to make this just slightly away from the engine clip so that it doesn't cover it later on. So I'm going to put that right here. And then we need another mark at 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters from the aft end. So that's going to be right here. Okay, we have two centering rings. One has a very small notch, one has a larger one. the end with the small notch is going to fit over the forward end like that. It'll just go over the forward part of the engine clip. Okay, and right now this is all being dry fit, no glue on it. The retainer ring here is just going to go over like this, and once that's dry, it just keeps this from moving back and forth like this, but still allows it to spring up to release the motor. And then the aft centering ring with the larger notch goes up to that 6mm mark. So once it's all glued together, it's going to look like this. Okay, so from here, you can just move that first ring out of the way a little bit. Take your glue and run a bead around that. And this can be fairly heavy. Okay, now I'm going to just move that forward. Okay, and I'm just going to look around, make sure that I'm reasonably straight there. If you're off a little bit, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But try and get it as close to perpendicular as you can so that all sides are equal. Okay, and then you can just take your finger and smooth that in to a nice fillet. Try not to get glue on the outer part of the ring. And then come to the other side, and that excess glue you can put in as a fillet there. If you need a little extra, that's fine. Okay, so that's really well glued into place there. If you need to make a little fine adjustment, that's good. Okay. And now you're going to do the same thing for that engine hook sleeve. So it's normally going to be at that mark. So what I'm going to do is just pull it over the mark a little bit, not too much, because I don't want to get glue on my mark until after I've got it into place. Once again, we're going to add a bead of glue. Okay, now this one is not bearing any thrust, so we don't need a whole lot of really strong fillets or anything like that. I'm just going to move this ahead, put it where my mark was there, and just once more I'll go ahead and make a fillet out of it. Again, this is not really having a lot of stress on it. And even if you get a little glue up here, it doesn't come in contact with anything. Okay, so that part's fine. And then down here, I'm going to move that ring right to the edge of the tube. And then we're going to add another bead of glue here. Now, I don't want to get glue in the notch, so be a little bit careful there. Alright, now I'll move this up to where my mark was. Right there. Okay, and also at this point you want to make sure that this is straight, going through all the rings. Okay, and then once more, make a fillet here. And again, try not to get any down in that notch. Okay, and I'm going to straighten that all out. And if you want, you can put another fillet here on the aft end. Okay, once more trying to keep it out of that notch so that the retainer clip can spring back and forth easily. Okay, now we'll just check and make sure that we're reasonably even all the way around. Okay. And at this point, we will let this dry completely before inserting it into our rocket body tube.